Hello, parents of New Life Kids. I am so excited today to share with you a conversation with Pastor Derrick Shepherd. He is our campus pastor at our Dublin campus and is a father, an incredible man of faith, and I think you guys are really going to enjoy the conversation we are about to have. So, welcome, Pastor Derrick.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
I'm so excited to have this conversation, especially because you have a very unique family. Why don't you share with our families a little bit about your wonderful family?
Sure. Well, we're definitely unique. Some would say crazy, but unique's the better word. My wife and I, we have five kids, five sons, and our oldest is 22, our youngest is 12, and you can fill in the rest. But so as you can imagine, a house full of boys can be crazy.
Crazy, maybe a little smelly, maybe a lot of laundry.
A lot of laundry. I've said it before, and I'll say it again, that our laundry pile, to me, is a living, breathing organism that has a life of its own. So we've learned to live with it.
Sometimes you just pull the laundry room door shut, right?
Yes, throw a blanket over it.
There you go. There you go. So in the middle of raising five boys, 22 to 12, you said, there has to have been a time when you were like, my goodness, communication about faith with these boys is a little challenging. And maybe there was even a question somebody asked you where you might have been a little stumped. Do you have a situation like that?
Well, sure. My oldest, I always say, is really the one that taught us how to be parents. He got the energetic young parent, and he also got the I've never done this before, plenty of screw ups parents. We had an opportunity. I'll say this: he came to us at about 13 years old and let us know that the only reason he was going to church was because we were, and he didn't believe any of this.
Wow.
And and my wife and I, as pastors, of course, you're thinking, oh my gosh, we're doing all this. This is everything our life is about. Every day, serving God and communicating the good news of the gospel, and our own son is not getting this. That really concerned us.
So what did you do after you felt the shock of that question? You had all those thoughts about, my goodness, this is what I do for a living, and my own son. You had all those thoughts, all those insecurities. You maybe reflected on some of your imperfections. What was your next step?
Well, my son is a very different type of personality from me. I tend to be more left brain, more artist type, have a degree in interior design and texture, color, all that kind of stuff. And he's a very information-oriented type person. He actually he's a Marine, he works at the NSA, very specific type mindset. And so at this time, him being 13, I had a sense of kind of how I thought. So I was able to get a DVD series that is really designed for college freshmen, kids that are who are graduating high school, getting ready to go into a secular college environment. That really, the DVD series kind of goes step by step, brick by brick, of what our faith is, and just in case there was any missing pieces. And so we sat on my bed, eating popcorn.
It's always a good way.
It's always a good way. Food is involved. And we sat and we watched this DVD together, and we paused it and talked about each point. And I felt like that was very helpful.
So you found this resource for a 13-year-old middle school boy where you brought it up to the next level. You found this resource where it's directed towards college kids because he's so intellectual. You talked about it. You really understood your child to know this is going to help make a difference. And so after sitting down, sharing some food, which is always a great idea, I think it doesn't just matter for boys, girls like food too, let me tell you. So you sat down, you had some food, you had some conversation. What was the aftermath of that? Did he say, okay, I totally understand, I have faith now, or was there more to that story that unfolded?
Well, I felt like he intellectually got all the pieces, and it was, in our conversation, I definitely could see that intellectually he was understanding, but there was still that disconnect, what I could perceive that was not, it wasn't moving him, like it moved me, or wasn't, yet that piece wasn't there.
It was up here, it wasn't
Yeah,
here.
exactly.
Okay. So you saw that I imagine that you pressed into your own faith in the middle
Absolutely.
of this.
Absolutely.
And what did that pressing in prompt you to do?
Well, I mean, I'm given the nutshell version, the clean, sanitized version, but there was a lot of crying out to God. I was concerned about my son. I was concerned about his faith. I was concerned about him knowing the Lord and having that wonderful asset in his life. And so in my prayer, and I felt like I needed to communicate to him like I was communicating or witnessing to somebody who I want for them to receive the Lord if I met them on the street. And so I remember very clearly, it was, I think we had gone out, he and I, and we pulled into the garage and shut the garage behind us, and we sat in the car and we had a conversation, and I gave him the unsanitized version of my testimony and let him know and communicated to him the depth of where God had brought me from and how he had healed my life and restored things in my life. Just really bared my soul, just exposed myself.
Yeah. So he was raised in a very different environment that you were. So you kind of had some language as we were preparing for this, where he was in a love bubble, where he hadn't been exposed to life outside of church. He and your other boys really hadn't seen that side of yourself. And so this was something that you said was really unusual for you.
Right.
Where it really did take a prompting for you to bare your soul to your kids, where it might have been easier had it just been somebody on the street for you to lay it all out. Right?
Absolutely. He seemed to be, he required more, and in this conversation, we getting just down and dirty with it. He was raised in an environment that I call it kind of a veggie tale world. He wasn't exposed to anything negative outside. We kept everything ugly outside. My wife and I had been pastors his entire life, so that's all he saw was church and church people and just that world. And so he's only seen me as that, a person that's always praying, a person that is praying for people, loving on people, trying to pastor people, all of that. And so he didn't know who I was before. He didn't know that I came, that I was saved from darkness and, real darkness. And so explaining that to him, he's sitting there wide-eyed going, okay, but it was something that I felt was effective in him really understanding the depth and the power of God and the grace of God coming into my life as I was and changing my life.
That's good.
So.
That is good, Pastor. And I think one of the things that our parents can really appreciate about your story is that you had all of these challenges while you were a pastor, while you were leading a church.
Oh, yeah.
And so being a pastor doesn't mean that you automatically have a ticket to have the perfect kid or that you have it all together.
Yeah.
I think you would agree with that.
Absolutely. That is true. My kids have dealt with, and I think it's, it's important that to know those things because I've often been called on and to help parents, speak to parents, pray for parents. And I feel like, clawing my way through raising 5 boys has given me a lot of insight. Now you put a girl in the mix, and I don't know really what I'm doing. I don't even know how to hold a baby girl. I get kind of, but boys, I'm pretty. I've seen quite a few personalities.
Well, maybe in the future we'll pray for you to have grandkids that
yes,
are girls.
Grandkids. Yes.
There you go. So, what would you suggest for parents who are really struggling? Maybe they have that girl and they just don't know what to do with them. What would you suggest for them in terms of communicating to the child that they have?
Well, for me, it has. I've learned this along the way. Each child has their own personality, and learning to communicate to that person within the frame of kind of how they think and how they are is really helpful. And, with a few of my kids, it has been a real stretch. I've had to bend because that's not usually maybe the way I think or the way I communicate or see the world. But I found that, one size does not fit all for raising, kids, and to approach that knowing that they're all different and it's going to require maybe something different in you to communicate to them.
I think that's the piece where your faith comes into this.
Yep.
So in the middle of having a child where one size doesn't fit all, what are some tips or some points of encouragement that you could share with the parents who are just looking for a way to connect with their child or to help grow faith in their child's life?
Absolutely. One is making church priority, making our relationship with God a priority. It's not like a pick and choose. Well, we may invite God into this conversation. It's always we're going to go to God first, and we're going to go to church is a part of our community and that we're going to honor and keep there, and then also allowing other voices. I think I learned along the way that I was not the only voice that my kids need to hear. Now, my ego would say, yeah, I've got everything that my kids need and I've got the wisdom. But you know what I found is a cheeseburger with the youth pastor, ice cream cone with a youth leader along the way has developed my kids in ways that I couldn't have done on my own. It's an interesting thing when someone else says something that you've been communicating for years, and all of a sudden that person says it one time and they all of a sudden get it. So
I'll just speak from the perspective of a child. Sometimes when your parents talk to you, you just hear that Charlie Brown teacher voice.
Yep.
And it takes somebody who's cooler than your parents
Right.
to chime in and say the same thing.
Yeah.
And then you go, oh, dang it, my parents are right.
Right. Yeah.
And I love how those two things segue together, where when you make church a priority, you are aligning yourself where you have God speaking into your life, you have God speaking into your child's life, and then you also have this community of maybe other parents. Maybe it's your life group, maybe it's your kids' life group,
Sure.
where there are voices coming in and speaking life into your child. And then you also have a little bit of the perspective where you can realize this child was designed and created by God for a specific purpose. Do you want to touch on that a little bit?
Loving your kid for who they are, I've learned along the way is extremely important. Rather than having a picture of what you desire them to be and trying to make them be that picture, love them for who they are and learn how to nurture who they are in their personality, in their skill set, in their emotional kind of intelligence. Can I give an example?
Yes, please.
One of my kids is, I'm not going to mention any names, but is a very emotional child and was an emotional child from the earliest beginning. I mean, and something would go wrong, if somebody took his toy, it was a complete breakdown of emotion and pain and sorrow that he could hardly pull himself out of. And
Yeah.
I found myself speaking to him, getting in his ear and saying, hey, bud, this is a gift. And to have this emotion is a gift from God. That's
Yeah.
something God has given you. Now, what it is it's our job to learn how to give it to God so he can allow it to be a tool and not something that can bring damage to us. And I basically said, if you cry every time your brothers pick on you, they're gonna toy with you all the time.
No, that would never happen.
But you know what? And so he's learned that emotional part of himself, which is intense, is something that God gave him. It's a beautiful thing. Now let's learn how to allow it to be used by God.
That's extraordinary.
Yeah.
There were two other pieces of advice that we had chatted about that I think that our parents could really benefit from. One was a story about a little bit of an adventure that you took your boys on. And then the other piece was about how you communicate to your boys when maybe you're not perfect. Do you want to touch on
Sure.
those two things?
Well, I feel like kids need an adventure. I like to give my kids what I call is above their pay grade kind of things.
A little promotion.
A little promotion. They're not necessarily aware of what's going on, but I'm aware of it. And so one in particular was I took my two oldest boys on a father-son trip. This was years ago, and we went to Washington, D.C. And one of the things that I gave them to do as a responsibility was I gave them the map to public transit in the city of D.C. And I let them know that you will be directing us in our travel while we're here.
My goodness.
And so they had to grab the map and figure out where the transfer was, and so that bonded us, and then also when you give someone trust, I feel like it can really be a payoff. I mean, of course, I wouldn't give them the keys to my car and say drive us someplace, but you give them something that they can handle. It causes them to stretch. It also builds trust.
A little healthy stretch, a little bit of a promotion.
Right.
I can imagine how much fun and how important that must have been to them, where they say, oh yeah, I'm in charge of the Metro map.
Yeah.
We're gonna do this thing.
Oh, yeah.
That must have been just an extraordinary turning point in your relationship.
Absolutely, and I think that they argued with each other trying to figure it out, and it gave them confidence.
I love
And
it.
I don't believe that they've gone to, if they're ever in a situation where a map is given to them and you need to find their way, they'll always reach back to the fact that, hey, we did this when we were 8 years old, 9 years old.
Well, and bringing that back to faith.
Not 8 or 9, I think it was more like 11 or 12. I'm not Superman.
I love that disclaimer. But bringing it back to faith, I think so often we feel like God has given us something where it's just outside of our comfort zone too.
Right.
And that helps us to depend on Him, and that helps us to grow in our faith. So modeling it in that way is so practical. And I think that while it's something that can teach them how to read a map or let them have a little bit of an adventure, help them to feel important, help give them a role in your outing and in your trip, I think it does come back to faith where they can, when they're reading a Bible or they feel like they're over their head, they can say, oh no, this is just like that one time my dad gave me that map.
Right.
I got this because I have everything that I need.
Right.
Which is extraordinary.
Oh yeah, and letting them know that I believe in you. I believe in you, and I'm gonna trust in your direction. It really, and I feel like it was the Lord that really gave me the idea, but it really made an impact on their life. And the second one that you mentioned was learning how to, and again, I've learned these things along the way, to apologize. There was a scenario that came up with my own father that. We had a difficult relationship, and there's certainly things I've forgiven, and our relationship is a good relationship now. And I discovered that there was something that was still in there that we never talked about, because I was afraid to bring it up, and so I felt like it was something that I needed to bring up. And in doing that, it gave him the opportunity to apologize to me, and I didn't really know or feel like I needed an apology, but it made an impact on me. And from that experience, I made my mind up to be available to apologize to my kids. And so I apologize to them, let them know that, I probably made mistakes. I'm sure I have, and I apologize for those mistakes. And in the future, if something should come up, a memory or a thought that you need my apology for, I'll apologize again, because I want you to know, to do that. I don't want you to there'll ever be a situation or a time where you feel like I've done something that you can't even talk to me about. I'm willing to apologize.
What impact has that had on the relationship you have with your 5 boys?
I think it has taken our communication, and it allows me to get to the bottom of if there's anything wrong. If I feel like there's something wrong, usually, people put a smoke screen out there, and give you, kind of tell you what you want to hear to get you off the trail so you stop asking them questions. But building that relationship with them and being vulnerable and apologizing and however else you build that vulnerability and that relationship, that connection, it allows them to tell you if there's something wrong or if there's something wrong and I don't know what it is, But it opens up the conversation that we can have something wrong, we can make mistakes, and that's okay in this environment within our relationship.
That's extraordinary. Man, this has been an amazing conversation, and I am so grateful, Pastor Derrick, that you would take the time to have this conversation with me and that we would be able to share it with the parents of our church, because I think that, everybody is imperfect, but you are an extraordinary parent, an extraordinary pastor, and I believe that this is going to benefit the parents of our church a lot. So thank you.
Thank you, Hannah. It was good to be here.
Man, I'm excited.
Appreciate it.